recap again, saying, repeating all the concepts we learned so far. We created site. We know we can make many models within site. Model will contain entities. Entities can be created in data library for sharing across different models, or you can create inside model just for that model locally. Entities have structure. Where you want to learn common structure, you map it to entity type. And when you map to entity type, make sure you have column mappings proper. Numeric columns must have numeric data type. Many make that mistake and get into trouble. We wrote decision rules against entities. We wrote different kinds of decision rules. Decision rules that retrieve data for us, decision rules that assign things for us, decision rules that produce result or action for us. We then saw what a hierarchy does. We group all entities and add to a hierarchy to produce complete output. We learned how to publish and check in our models. When you publish and check in, your work become available for user interface use. We looked at application builder. We created many pages. We put UI elements onto those pages. We bind them to entity. Some entity we bind to decision rule using on update. We saw properties of controls. Red property means compulsory. Every, like drop down control. When you look right side, where you bind in data source entity, there are some red colored properties. The property is in red font.
Is mandatory.
Yes, they are mandatory. If it is black, no problem if you don't put any. They're optional. We learned how to use navigation. Navigation helped to bring many pages into one. And we put some nice styles. And
with use of CSS file.
Correct. And we saw how we can navigate from one page to another. And when we make selection, how our decision rule come to life.
So
Finally, we are going to see what constraint rule does. So far, we only talk about decision rules, and we did a lot of decision rules. We talk a lot about constraint rule, but we never did constraint rule. In this final exercise, we're going to design constraint rule to show on the user interface what happens when you make invalid selections. So combination of brake and chain handlebars, is it valid? Or combination of brake, chain, handlebars is invalid. So for true, false, invalid, valid type of selections, we are going to use constraint rules. How constraint rules useful? It helps to get the customer into the right path of selecting items. Without giving them not knowing which one to choose and coming up with invalid options. If we write good constraint rule, we can send them down the path of correct option to choose. So, how do constraint rules work? You can find in your product catalog. If you have a product catalog, you identify for this card, this is the combination that will work, this is the combination that will not work. That is a good place to start to see how you can write constraint rules. When you model constraint rules, they can be value-based constraint. That means if you say your constraint rule, if price greater than 50 and you choose something that is under $50, it is invalid.
Value-based.
That is value-based. Object to object means if you're choosing one selection, its output determines what you can choose for other selection. That is from one object to another object. Numeric constraints, simple. Just like I said, they're like the first example I gave, greater than 50, less than 50. So value based means black or orange. If value is black, engine is this, valid. If value is orange, engine is something else, then invalid. One-way constraint. Remember, I said to you, by default, constraints work in both directions.
Bidirectional.
Yes, A will affect B, B will affect A. If you want to reduce modeling effort of writing a lot of decision rules, good practice is to make a few one-way constraint rules, which means constraining happen only in one direction. So selection in A will affect what options are available in B. But what selection in B will not affect on A, because the direction is left to right only. By default, it is both ways.
わかるんですよね。大丈夫ですよね。
交通行動、そうすること。
制限、そのコンステンルールっていうのが、まあいろんなバリューベースとかオブジェクトとかもあるのは、まあパターンとしてあるようなんですが、基本的にデフォルトでは、一つを選んだらこっちからもこっちからも両方からこう制限がかかるようなものなんですけども、うまくやるためにはワンウェイにせよという話なんですね。言ってることは分かるような気がするんですけど、その辺の意味合いがちょっとピンときてないのも正直事実ですよっていうところがあります。
Okay. We saw in our previous workshop what are expanders and what are pages and how we can use is visible, is enabled, etc. to show or not show or lock or unlock things for us. The good thing with constraint rules is you can also give custom invalid messages. Instead of saying invalid, you can say sorry, you must choose, or give alternative friendly message. With constraint rule you can do that. So in constraint rule editor you can give custom message. You will see how to do that.
Message for customers.
Correct. When they hover over why something is invalid, that pop-up, it's not pop-up, like the tooltip will appear with the custom message you have set for it. So we're going to have a look at doing a constraint rule, and we'll give a custom message for that constraint rule. We'll do a workshop on that. So typically this is what constraint rule looks like. The outcome is always valid, invalid, true, false, yes, no. Constraint rules do not set values for you. Constraint rules do not assign things for you. Constraint rules do not calculate anything for you. Constraint rules do not return results. They
Only valid or invalid.
Yes, correct.
コンセントはディシジョンルールみたいにその値を設定したりとか、その他諸々のことは何もしてくれなくて、OK か OK じゃないかだけを返すようです。すみません。
So, like I said, most obvious place for you to see how constraint rules work is in the user interface. When customer makes selections, they see whether it is valid or invalid, and it shows. By default, they are always firing. So you don't need hierarchy to bind two constraint rules. They will always fire. And by default, they are firing in bi-direction. You can choose whether to make it one direction or not. Again, please use meaningful names with your constraint rules. Naming convention, you will hear this every time. Give meaningful names. Here is an example of a constraint rule. So, what is saying? You have a bi-directional constraint rules here. If you choose road bike,
あれ、もうちょっと大きくしてもらった方がいいよね。
そうですね。Please show us more bigger.
This screen is for
presentation mode.
どうしたらできるんですか
Function of 8. No, see, it was working earlier on, and
今セカンドスクリーンオンリーになってるよね。
スライドショーにした。
This is not what we want. What I want.
I know I want. That's what I'm trying right now.
How about this? Yeah, TPK であれがいらへんのか。
これがアプリケーションの中の問題なんじゃないですか。
スライドショー問題だとエンドスライドショー。
See, none of my options are. This has been happening since.
今 PC スクリーンオンリーだからそうだ。エクステンド。
Yeah.
エクステンド選べないの？
昨日やってましたよね。
うん。Did you restart the presentation again?
ポイントな気がしますよね。
2番目のスクリーンは、
Okay.
OK。Thank you.
So, this is an example of you have on your page 3 entities: style, seat, and handlebar.
Style, seat, handlebars.
When you choose road bike, those 4 records in seat that you see in black, they are shown as valid and available for selection. If you choose the gray items, they are invalid. So what is happening is road bike selection has constrained the value set in seat and handlebars to show you there is a valid set and there is an invalid set. Same thing
For mountain.
when, yes, for mountain and for beach. If you do the reverse, so that was top down from top to bottom. If you do the reverse, instead of choosing style and seat, you choose handlebar, make a selection. You will notice that selection and handlebars will constrain seat and style entities. Give valid set and invalid.
It's a default.
Yes, this is bidirectional. And if you see, based on second example, if the user try to choose beach bike instead of mountain bike, it become red. What that means is for handlebars, off-road all-purpose handlebar selection, only mountain is a valid style selection. But if you choose beach, it is invalid. Remember I said all valid selections in black, invalid selections in gray.
Okay.
So in the third column, user is making a gray selection in style. So it is invalid.
Try to in the selecting beach.
Yes?
This is invalid selection.
Yes. What the decision, the constraint rule would have been written to say if you choose this kind of handlebar,
Yeah. This one.
yeah, the only valid selection is mountain bike.
Okay.
Mountain bike. If you choose beach or road, it is invalid.
But selection is always made from style.
No.
No.
By
Some
default they are.
customers
But
by the
customers can click wherever they want.
Okay.
You cannot tell customer you must do this way because customer always right.
Customers are God.
Even if they're wrong, they're always right. Yes? And see, if you want to impose, if you want to give that strictness, what do? you make constraint
one direction.
one direction.
Okay.
So,
So in this case, in this use case, user select handlebars first,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So
Yes.
this selection makes prohibits reflect.
this selection affects other
Okay.
selections. Same way,
Mhm.
top selection affects bottom selection. This is example of things happening in both directions. So that was generally how constraint works.
Mhm.
It was based on values. Value-based constraint
Mhm.
means they define valid-value relationship.
Okay.
Bike type's value is road bike.
Mhm.
Seats value is hybrid or shock absorbent or ergonomical, which is valid.
Value
Otherwise-
of the string style.
Yes.
Okay.
Value of the string characteristic. Correct. So this is an example of how you write this constraint rule and how values determine relationships and validity. Another type of constraint is object to object. That means compares the values of entities or characteristics.
Could you repeat
Entity
again?
to entity comparison.
Entity to entity.
Yeah. This was entity's value to entity's value. So this is value to value constraint. Bike type is an entity.
Yes, that's right.
Touring bike is a characteristic of,
Entity bike type.
yes.
Mhm.
In this case, you are comparing the entities itself. The whole entity is object. So you're making object to object comparison. So it compares the value of the whole entity. So you are not, so what that means is if you set a budget of $1,000, yeah, and you choose a particular bike, it is not comparing the bike's cost as such, it's comparing the whole bike to see if it fits within budget or not.
Mm-hmm. 結局ここ見るからバリューベースのような気もするんですが、オブジェ
List
クトオリエントになるんですかね。
So this is a good way to filter your list when you are giving customer the option of setting a budget. If customer says, I want $5,000, you then write a constraint rule that allows them to choose to make valid selections against a budget of up to $5,000. So in this example, you see, bike's list price is used for comparison.
Yes, that's right.
So if you set a budget, simple user budget, numeric entity, put 5,000, you get customer input 5,000. Then internally, the constraint rule always working. It's saying, oh, is this budget 5,000 greater than bike list price? Then it's valid. That means you have a budget of $5,000. Anything that is less than or equal to $5,000.
あるんですよ。オブジェクトとオブジェクトと呼ぶ理由がちょっとピンときてないっていうのが正直なところなんです。
Object also makes sense. One object is user budget.
Correct? Other
But
object?
user budget entity is money. Entity is money.
Yeah.
And so another one object is list price.
Yes,
List price entity is numerical
Correct.
price.
Correct. correct.
Compare the price to the budget.
Yes. Because you can do two ways. You can either make a customer select a budget or you can get them to input a budget. So based on input, you're comparing object with object. It can get confusing between value-based
Yes, yeah,
constraint.
that's right.
So often they look like one and the same. So I can see where your confusion is coming from. Because
I understand what you explained so
Mhm.
far, but yeah, I don't know the reason why you call this object to object.
you,
Yeah,
you will see in your constraint rule how that comes into
Okay.
being.
please.
Numeric constraint. So it's the same as over here. Oh, did I miss something? No, I think I missed something. Yeah. Numeric constraints. That means you're comparing numbers. It's not very different from your object to object because your user budget was a numeric value.
Mhm.
Your buy, pardon me, list price is also a numeric value. So you can define constraint rule for numbers using numeric comparators.
Okay.
Is x greater than y,
Mhm.
otherwise invalid. One-way constraint is, notice the difference here. If you set something to be a one-way constraint, the entity that you have set as one-way constraint will get a nice yellow arrow up at the top.
Okay.
That means bike type can constrain selections for handlebars,
Mhm.
but handlebars cannot constrain selections for bikes. That means it is only left to right. Now, you can set one way in two levels.
Two levels.
Two levels. If you set one way constraint at the entity level, because there is a system property there, that means every constraint rule that this entity uses will be working only in one direction. So, yeah?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Or am I
makes sense.
confusing? If you set one-way constraint in system property at entity level, if you write 10 constraint rules and that entity is used in each of those constraint rules, in all constraint rules, the direction will be one way only.
Entity level.
Yeah, if you set one way
Mhm.
in entity level,
What's the other?
the other is only at the constraint rule level. That means,
entity にコンスタントルールを設定するのか。
so you can make one entity work throughout in one way only,
Mhm.
or you can make the entity work one way just for that particular rule. Make sense? So what I'm saying is, if you have bike type and you have not ticked that, yeah,
Not checked.
not checked,
Okay.
you have a bike type handlebar constraint. You click one way here.
Mhm.
For this decision, for this constraint rule,
Mhm.
bike type entity will be one direction constraining only. Say you have another constraint rule called my bike type constraint rule.
My bad type.
Just something,
Okay.
another constraint rule, call it X or Y or Z.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't have this tick.
Mhm.
Yeah?
But it's one way.
No.
No.
Setting it one way inside a constraint rule
Mhm.
makes it one way only for that
I
constraint
see.
rule. Setting it one way in the entity
Okay.
makes it one way for every constraint
Okay.
rule you use. So if this bike type entity is used in 3 constraint rules, if you take one way constraint here, it will be one way for all 3.
In set at the setting of entity.
Yes.
Okay.
At the entity level, if you set one way, if you use that entity in how many ever constraint rules,
Okay.
it will all be one way.
Yeah.
Cool?
ワンウェイのセッティングはエンティティでやる方と、それからこの各ルールの中でやる方法があって、こっちでやると全部に、まあ、要はまとめてやれますよって話ですかね。すみません。で、僕ちょっとまだオブジェクトとオブジェクトの方がちょっと分かってなかったりするのは本音として
See, so that's,
Yeah, okay.
that is what it says. One way entity.
It's one way entity,
Then-
one way constant rule.
Correct.
これ
So
はこの
if you set only at constraint level, only for that rule.
Mhm.
If you set at entity level, it will apply to all the constraints in which entity is used.
Okay.
So see, this is an example
Hmm.
how this example here, there is a one-way constraint set against style, which means if you choose style, it will constrain the handlebars, but if you choose handlebars, it will not constrain style.
So it means the customer can select off-road.
Cannot select.
Yes, that is
That is the
invalid.
cannot.
Yeah, okay.
No, ask the question. Ask the question.
Oh, yeah, no.
So it is very, very symbolic mean. So this is one way. This is not one way.
No. This is fully example of one way.
One way.
What this means?
Both
Ah,
are
sorry.
one-way samples.
Yeah,
Yeah,
both
so-
are one-way samples, but one shows valid selection, another one shows invalid selection.
So
That's-
こっちを先に
So that means in the first one, it's going from top to bottom. In the other one, if you try to go bottom up, you get invalid.
This is the first,
Yes,
and this is first.
that's the first, yes.
And so not
That is an invalid option.
invalid.
Unselectable, right?
Yeah, you can unselect in order to, yeah. Just because a value is invalid does not mean you can't select it, unselect it. You can always unselect it. Characteristic filter is like in Excel. You know how you want to put filters on columns? If you click where in entities, you can, if you use system property on every characteristic to filter the entity value, you can then get a result like this. So if your bike type is touring bikes and you click touring bike, only records for touring bike will be result. If you click mountain, only for mountain. Again, I cannot recommend when to use it, when not to, but quite obvious, the place you will use it is if you have a lot of records and you want to filter. So always remember, if you want to provide user with the ability to filter the values, go into the entity, go into the specific characteristic and click characteristic filtering. That will allow this Excel-like filtering to be available. Multi-select lists. Now, this is an example of when you have about 50 options, yeah? 50.
Okay.
And you have this or that, yeah, and 5 of them are invalid and everything else is valid. What is more effort? To list 45 invalid items and
Only
show
showing
the
the
5 valid
valid
ones, and the next branch will be in otherwise. So otherwise is very useful. You already saw that in decision rule you have otherwise. Same concept apply here as well. When you have long list of values, use easy path. Capture small list of valid values, make the otherwise branch. So that way you get to avoid having to have big values. That means it's like you can choose multiple values. So, right at the beginning I said when you click on rule builder, your model homepage will have this dashboard. If you have any errors or warnings, this will become red, errors and warnings. Otherwise it shows in green. So some performance in order to have your model make fast, execute rules faster. some good practice is optimize number of constraint rules and number of leaves. What that means is, remember how I said don't make your decision rule really big, make that split into decision rules and make one decision rule as input for another one. In your constraint rule as well, like that example I give you, where you give 45, make good use of your otherwise wherever possible.
To make the system
Yes.
almost better.
Yes. Another thing, if you want to avoid writing a lot of decision rules, make serious effort to consider you want to give customer this kind of experience. Try make decision about what entities you want to make one way, so customer don't click all over the place. So if you set customer straight away saying he can only go left to right, then you make your constraint rule one way.
Which gives you better user experience for customers, right?
Correct. And also saves the modeler from writing a lot of decision rules. And another thing is in using characteristics where you have list price, cost price, give your characteristic good, meaningful names. It helps to retain knowledge and able to share as well when someone else take on modeling work when you are not available. When models become large, you can actually split them. So that means a really big product can be split into 3 bits, so one model for each bit, which in turn has components. So when one model fully configured, it can act as input for next model to add. That is another way of dealing with really big models. So we already saw how to do pages. We are now going to have a look at some special properties on every control. As you see, red properties are compulsory, they are mandatory, they must be filled. Black ones are optional. I also talked about in previous exercise about is visible and is enabled. You can set the visibility of size entity based on selection of byte type entity. That means size is hidden. If byte type is selected, that means if selection made against byte type, size will become visible. Another way of enhancing user experience is don't allow user to make size selection. Disable it. You can also use the is enabled property that is right below the is visible. That means if byte type is selected, size which was disabled will become enabled.
The value of byte type
Is
selected
selected.
right, it's visible.
Yes.
Okay.
Same thing. If byte type dot is selected, if you put in is enabled, then size will become enabled. So depending on how you want to design your user experience, if you want to put a lot of elements on your page, use visibility because then increase page
To
size.
save users' attention.
Yes. If you want to prevent, if you only have limited, if you know there's only limited elements on page and you want to make everything transparent for user, make them disabled until such time that as and when they click, options become available. All design considerations, these options are all available. So visibility, enablement, they're always just true or false. They're based on true or false. There is nothing special there. If the visibility of this entity is based on the selection of this entity, it is based on is selected. So if this entity selection is selected, It is true. Because it's true, this is now visible. The same, if this is selected, is this enabled? True. So the true value here allows this to become visible or enabled. Yes. This is very useful, in insurance companies. If someone, customer, going onto site and getting quote for insurance. If they say, if you ask question, do you want car insurance? Do you want home insurance? If you tick that, more panels become available. And when more panels become available, user gets chance to enter more details. If they're only on website to choose life insurance, then everything else is invisible. So you only give them quote, you only allow them to make selection to make quote for life insurance. So that's how visibility works. We also saw how to set default values, although like I said yesterday, product engineering is looking at this problem in 4.5. Even you make default, it doesn't stay as default. So I can't really show you this slide and give you explanation because it doesn't work. Basically, the idea is the same. When you launch a page, you want to give a default value to that. So you just mark that record for selection. It will be auto-selected for you. And sometimes, because you might remember, we wrote our component default values decision rule for the type of road bike, mountain bike, touring bike. We made some default assignments for other entities. That is also good practice because if you have customer on a website where they have to choose 50 options, by writing rules like this, you are reducing the amount of clicks they have to do. You're making recommendations for them. And it is always good to have recommendation applications written for. So yes, just another example of how we set default values to handlebars and other things. Now remember I told you when you set constraint rules, valid, invalid, it doesn't show you anything. When you make invalid selection, you see something red and you're like, it's red. Why is it red? You want to give useful customer message to customer, friendly message. In every constraint rule editor, you can give custom message in a section called outcome message.
Okay.
You're searching a handlebar that is not yet. Have a look at that. Yeah. So here you can put custom message. So if somebody choose $5,000 as budget and they make selection against $6,000 bike, what can you say here? Sorry.
It's,
Total price is over your budget.
Yes, yes.
is this so only plain text?
Plain text.
Plain text. So, for example, HTML or something.
Can we
No.
give the CSS?
No, only text.
His question is, can we make the message
Not
red or
here, not here.
Okay.
So what you can do in that case is if a value is invalid, maybe you can put a label, a static, a label, 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 and make it visible. So if something becomes invalid, you can say label is visible true, and in that label you can style it saying sorry, it is.
メッセージの代わりにレベルを出すとか、ラベルを出すとか出さないにしてそこでCSS で照準を。
That is an example of where you want to make more powerful user experience. That is where having some web design knowledge really helps. There are various techniques. You can have a JavaScript pop-up that says sorry, out of budget, or you can have this, or you can have label appearing and saying sorry, invalid. So every entity can have a traffic light.
every entity
Ten.
can have traffic
When
light.
every entity, when it is bound to a control, that control has something called traffic light.
Traffic light.
Traffic light.
Traffic light.
Correct, traffic light. When it is not selected, it is orange in color. When it is selected and it is valid, it is green in color.
I see.
If it is invalid, it's red in color. So that's called traffic light. You can set traffic light at the whole page level, or you can set traffic light for each individual entity as well. Now, I would advise that you use traffic lights sparingly, because sometimes the styles interfere and the traffic lights, they go up and you know. So when you design, when you make your CSS, also bear in mind you might have to do some styling around the traffic light, because these colors, they are all defined in the overarching JavaScript, the overarching Bootstrap framework. Whatever you write to override those styles has to be able to match with. Correct.
Interference.
Yes.
We must avoid interference.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So see, usually when you hover over red traffic light, it just says why invalid. Now, because you put custom message, you can say you're selecting a handlebar which is not recommended for. There, this one.
Okay.
Because you put custom message. So say how I told you, you can also place your messages on in a text box. So if you're not happy with if you want to give more style to your error messages, drag a text box, make it invisible.
Okay.
Once other selection is made, that text box will become visible. And whatever message. Yes, you can do like that as well. What that does, it gives you flexibility. Why? Because then you can style the text box as well. And constraint rule, if you just give that custom message, you are my OK Google Assistant is auto activating. It's been listening to all my conversations. Silly thing. Yeah, that's it. If you have many messages that you want to give, you can group them all together. How can you group them? Group.
Many messages from
Other entity. Yeah,
okay.
you can group them together.
What?
Hey? You can put them all together in one group. What did we use to put
What is
something?
the reason for making groups of messages? What is I don't know the actual use case. Grouping error messages.
Back in the days when you had form, some forms had asterisks which said mandatory.
Okay.
And if you don't fill them, you had individual message appearing next to that. Very ugly look. Instead, what you can do is you can take all those message and put into a group. Sorry, the following fields are necessary. And you say this is required, this is required, this is required, this is required. For me personally, it looked better. And what did we use to group all our entities together? We used something to present everything into a sales bomb. What was our sales bomb?
Hierarchy.
Yes. You can do the same thing
We
for
can apply
messages.
hierarchy.
Correct. See, messages to be generated by simply executing hierarchy. So hierarchy can be used there as well. Anything to do with grouping. Grouping and displaying group of results.
Okay.
Hierarchy. We saw on update is mostly used to fire decision rules and hierarchies. This is are component default values. Remember, when you choose a bike type, the on update of the bike type executes the component values default decision rule. That is bound in on update. On load also can execute decision rule, which means when the page loads itself, you can get it to execute a hierarchy.
It's a default.
Something
the
like
phrase
something like a default group. For example, if you have a really big product and you want to provide standard options, on page load itself, the hierarchy will execute decision rule in background, make default selections, and give you a product.
From the point of view of marketing. For
Yeah.
example.
Yes. Yes. It depends on the size of the product, really. So, with that, all our modeling environment relationships are complete. We created sites have many models have entities have data library. Data library can be used to share entities. You can create entities from data library, you can bring them across. They have common structure, apply the mappings, write decision rules against entities, group them together into a hierarchy, write constraint rules also to show what is valid, what is invalid. We prepare our model, we save the changes, we committed them so nobody can delete things. We then publish, we make available for application builder. We then make pages, we drag and drop elements, and we make many pages, we bind them to a navigation. Navigation helps hang all pages together and make selections, and you see how decision rules execute. You will now also see how a constraint rule executes. And with that, our training will be complete. So, one more exercise.
Let me move on before ending your lecture. Once everything is finished, set, applications we create can use these everything.
Yes?
In addition, other external applications such as Dynamics
Yes.
or Salesforce.
Yes, in recent times, yes, Salesforce.
Can I use the same outcome, right?
Correct. In your ERP system, whether it is CRM or Dynamics or Salesforce or Sales Portal, the CSP, every product which you add to your quote line has a gear icon. That gear icon brings you to the world of configurator. In configurator, you make selections. As you make selections, all the rules you build, they work in the background. When you are happy with your selections, you see final summary. Yes, everything's okay. You save application. Window closes. In the background, integration is at work, writing back data into CRM or Salesforce or CSP or Dynamics. And then you say, yep, I'm happy, generate quote. Then the document management side of things takes all that information, uses template, which either you have defined or from existing templates, makes a proposal document.
So the whole is called CPQ.
Correct. What we have learned is the underlying thing that the building blocks. Okay? We'll do a quick workshop and